In the beginning, there were Native Americans, pretty much just like everywhere else. And this lasted for like hundreds of years. Eventually, they got together, and there was a particular tribe that kind of stood out and combined that was better than the rest. And they were called the Timoto Creekas. This tribe is attributed with the creation of the arepa. That's that pancake-like little food that they have, and they fill it with meat, cheese, or whatever have you. Pretty much anything. Sometimes it's a snack, and sometimes they'll put a whole meal into it, but typically it's just a snack. In any case, after many years, everybody heard about Christopher Columbus, and that's the guy who did not discover America. But anyway, that guy started a bunch of invasions, and after he did those, then the Spanish did some more, and the Spanish invaded Venezuela. This is around the 16th century, where well, the Spanish invaded, and the native people, they tried to resist, but then it just didn't work, and the leaders of the tribes were put to death. And naturally, just like any other war, the winning country decides to make slaves out of the losers. So some of the Venezuelan people were made slaves, and then after they did that, they decided to bring over slaves from other countries, namely African Americans. And then they would use these people to try and mine, finding gold or silver, because like there was a whole rumor about the city of the gold around that time. They're also establishing plantations for cocoa, because cocoa beans, they make chocolate, and they were considered a luxury back then. Arguably, they're still a luxury today, but that's different. In any case, they needed slaves to harvest those so that they could get more money, gold or whatever. But then, well, supposedly a lot of things is America's fault, are America's fault, because America was the first country to seek independence and succeed, and then the Napoleon Revolution happened, and supposedly uh, both of those influenced the Latin American revolutions and the Venezuelans. Because if nobody had done it before, then they would not have thought that it would be a good idea to try to do it by themselves. That's not to say that they were peacefully accepting Spain's rule to begin with, because there were actually some like raids on plantations. They tried to free each other, and so on and so forth. There was resistance before the revolution, but the actual big revolution happened in about the first early years of the 1800s. Because like they had 7 of them declare independence, but they weren't like really dependent yet. And so there was lots of years of fighting, and then finally in 1820 they officially became independent. But they were a part of the Gran Colombia at the time until about 1830, where they become known as the First Republic of Venezuela. Now after this, you would think it would be all uphill for them, right? It's like they get free, they're their own country. But nah, they had dictators, and they had some really horrible politicians and people who abused their power. Skipping over that though, overall they have had a fairly pleasant society up to now. That is to say, they have a 95% literacy rate, and just as many as them have degrees if you compare them to the United States. And the weird thing though is, if you were to compare the Hispanic people in the United States to the Hispanic people of Venezuela, then the people of Venezuela do better by a large margin. And thanks to their oil, they had actually eaten very well for a very long time, up until the last 5 years. Because after Chavez left office, everything just collapsed. I hear there's an inflation of 700%, and on top of that, there are actually government regulations stating what they can and cannot buy because there's just not enough food, not enough toilet paper. They don't even have toothpaste. I cannot imagine a world where I had to decide not to brush my teeth on it one day so that I can have enough toothpaste to last me through the week. That's pretty bad. On the other hand, they are situated in a pretty good place topographically. I mean, they're right next to the ocean, so they should still have fish and seafood. And since they are in a tropical region, like an Amazonian rainforest type of deal, they can grow their own fruit, most people, or some people. Though they still have problems with people stealing their fruit because not everyone grows their fruit for whatever reason. That's not to say they're bad people, because they're actually supposed to be really hospitable and friendly. They'll hug each other. They even kiss their family members for greeting. And they might even hug you as a stranger and ask you how your day was. Very curious about other cultures, although right now there's some political tension between Venezuela and the US because of obvious reasons with Trump and all. But that aside, typically they will not tell you if they're angry. Like when we get angry in the US, you can tell, but they're a higher context culture, so they'll kind of subtly express it rather than outright tell you that they're mad with you. And when they invite people over to the house, they actually have this tradition where they would feed guests, including their favorite food, arepas. Those are those fries, delicious things that are like pancakes, but with cheese and filling that I mentioned earlier. Those, empanadas, rice and beans, those are their staples, or at least they were before all of the economic factors started happening. If they have the supplies, they would prefer to fry foods and still like corn, cornmeal, corn flour based things. They have another dish called halacas that's they eat every day on Christmas. That's another dough made from corn flour and mixed with some beef and pork or some seafood if they're in a coastal region. Now, they're very family oriented. What I mean by this is they have to have at least one family meal a day. And whenever someone gets sick, the first people they go to is their parents or their grandparents to ask them how they should get better. But unfortunately, at this point in time, most of them are eating just so that they don't starve. Incidentally, though, they refuse to eat rabbits as one of their presidents suggested. Not that I can blame them. Rabbits are adorable. I don't know if I could eat a rabbit either. I mean, I think I would if I was starving, but I don't know. In any case, their largest health problem is nutritional value, most specifically anemic. And upwards of 30% of some of their poorer regions are suffering from the iron deficiency, which is obviously because they don't have enough protein in their diet. The only suggestion that I can think of that makes sense with their economic problem is having rice and beans and incomplete proteins to compensate for that. Of course, for the wealthier people, they actually have 30% of them being overweight. So those who can actually afford the basic necessities and bread and whatnot need to slow down on their cornmeal and arepa uptake. And then, though the book says that poverty also has a potential connection to obesity, in the case of Venezuela, it is not entirely there. Because previously this country has had a good economy until the last decade. In the beginning, there were Native Americans, pretty much just